I made the film for all of us. It sounds really corny, but I think Native and non-Native people all deserve to know the stuff that we don't get taught. And it's a fine balance in a film. You want to make something that is cinematic and entertaining, but that also reveals information and not in such a didactic way. So trying to find that balance, hopefully that appeals to Indigenous and non-Indigenous audiences wherever they happen to be. Colonization Road is a one-hour documentary that explores sort of the history and of settlement in Canada through policy that actually created a system of roads that are known as colonization roads. And we have a fantastic host, Ryan McMahon, who sort of takes us on this journey up and down those roads, looking at the history of colonialism and the impacts of it on Indigenous people here specifically we focus in Ontario, but in Canada, but of course easy enough to extrapolate to all of this whole hemisphere. Well, for me personally, as a first-time filmmaker, no one was going to give me any money to make a movie with a real budget, with a broadcast license attached, with a distribution deal attached. I went the Arts Council route because, not because it's easy, but because it is accessible to artists, and people on those committees are also artists, and they're gauging a varying degree of things, passion and experience and ability and vision and the creative treatment and all of those things. And because I had a long relationship in theater, I think people were willing to take a chance on me making that transition at the Arts Council level. But it does speak to the realities of it's hard to access funding regardless, even if you're experienced. People like Zacharias Kunuk still accesses council funding for works that maybe don't end up at TIFF. Maybe they're smaller projects for the community, but it speaks to the need. There's just the need to tell these stories and a limited resource to pull from in order to fund them. I think organizations like Cinema Politica are really important because you can reach an audience that, as an indie filmmaker, I don't have access to. And for films that are dealing with these kinds of issues that are social, political, historical, that challenge the not only the colonial narrative, but the crap that we're fed on a daily basis from media. Those films need a home. They deserve a place to be seen and to be experienced by people who are not only like-minded, but who are maybe curious about subjects that they don't know how to invite themselves into. And I think this is the kind of environment that says, all are welcome, and this may be new information to you, but you might learn something. At the very least, you'll be entertained for a couple hours. I was an actor for a long time, and part of the difficulty of maintaining an acting career is that you're at the mercy of other people making decisions. You have no agency in terms of the script or the way it's shot or the final cut. And oftentimes as actors, we're expected to be the, all nations ambassador. We're supposed to know everything about other people's history and culture, even though we're just actors, right? It's a tough burden, and it's an unfair burden, but it's also, I think, a driving force for why I started to move into theater as a writer and a producer back in the 90s. I was just so frustrated with the way Indigenous women were being portrayed and the way our stories were being told, and having to constantly feel like I had to educate or fight the producers or the director, whatever the case may be. It's just not satisfying. So I stopped saying yes to a lot of roles because it just didn't feel good, didn't feel right. And I think the stakes are high because specifically for Indigenous people, we're here in our own territories, in our own lands, where Indigenous images and imagery have been used as what I kind of call like a, image genocide. The mascots, the horribly racist cartoons from back in the day, those are things that were intentionally developed in early pop culture that set a tone and were part of the sort of propaganda machine of the colonizers. It's not disconnected from the power structure. And so I think you start to see now, this surge of Indigenous filmmakers, theater makers, musicians, like just sort of taking the forms back, flipping things on their heads, doing things really different and cool and innovative because our lives are at stake.